Hey, kura koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News. Chewy, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Oh, good evening to you. It's lovely to be back with you. And I love to count. How are you, man? Tell me about your day.
Not too bad. Not too bad. A lot of my friends are up in Auckland at the moment for the Bad Religion Social Distortion show.
Of course. If I had $1 for every time I thought about going to that show, I would have $0.
You're not a punk rocker, man. You don't understand.
No, I'm not a punk rocker at all. I like getting to the show and saying, "G'day, how are you?" People are probably thinking, "Oh, these guys, they've been planning together for an hour beforehand." And it's like, no. What time did I get down here? About 3 minutes to 9. So, should we go?
It's always a good sign.
Let's go.
It's always a good sign when I'm the first one in the room. I'm like,
well, but you weren't the first in the room. Obviously, I done all the prep. But
no, I was the first in the room.
Okay, fair enough. In the room where it happened, as said by Hamilton. Hey, interesting old show tonight, I think, actually, because there are these little lines coming together. I'll be honest. End of last year, I think all of us were kind of saying this is a National Party election to lose. It's Nationals to lose, not Labour's to win. But there's these little threads coming up. There's little instances happening every now and again, here and there, and it's a long way away. But I tell you what, Chewy, the idea of a snap election does not seem so silly to me right now, because at the moment, Labour is riding pretty high, comparatively speaking. New Zealand First is nowhere near to be seen, and there are lots of questions around Mr. Luxon's leadership. So that's going to be a kind of a topic that goes through this evening. We'll be having a look at it, especially because at the moment, David Seymour seems to be doing a lot of the hard mahi for the Labour Party. I don't know if you've noticed this. I'll get into the details about that. But you know how you said the other day, Hooton seems to be a left-wing sort of plant from time to time? At the moment, Mr. Seymour is, I think, doing a lot to help the left get back into power. And I applaud him for that. I applaud him. But
welcome, Comrade Seymour.
Hi, before we get into it, I wanted to show you something, right? Have a look at this. See this picture? This has been on our screens, this sort of imagery for the last, 3 weeks, because there's been so many of them. This came up on my feed last night. I'd finished the show. I went upstairs, and often when I finish the show, I take a half hour and I take a break and have a cup of tea, and because I'm old, and I just chill out for a bit, and then I head off towards bed. This was in my YouTube feed when I went to bed last night, and I went, "Oh, what are they talking about?" What do you think this is, Chewy? Got any ideas?
What is it?
West Auckland on high alert after extensive flooding. This is not the last 2 floods. This is the flood 3 times ago. And this third flood 3 times ago was, I believe, I saw the date before, August 31st. And it just made me think, we're talking about climate change, and we're talking about these events happening again, and you're talking about not wanting to hear the word unprecedented anymore. I wanted to share this. I'm not necessarily going to show everybody what's going on, but I wanted to share this because I had a look at this last night thinking that I was going to get some news, and it was from a year ago. Oh, no, sorry, it was 2021. So it was a year and a bit ago that this has been happening again. So this is from a year and a bit ago, massive flood in West Auckland, and we've had 2 floods this year. So I think we have to be careful to draw an exact analogy or an exact example, but because when the Christchurch earthquake happens and people are like, "Oh my God, all these new earthquakes are happening." It wasn't that there were new earthquakes happening, it's that there was more isolated earthquakes happening in that region. There's 1.3 million earthquakes on the face of the planet every single year. And yes, Christchurch got 10 or 20,000 of them, but out of 1.3 million, that's a very small percentage. And the number of earthquakes around the world didn't go up that particular year. We have to be careful not to do that. But I have to say, over the last year or so, bit more than a year, there have been at least 3 major floods.
Residents of West Auckland are still on high alert tonight after what some are calling the worst flooding they've ever seen.
The worst flooding they'd ever seen a year ago.
Hectares and hectares underwater. Animal residential areas, whole streets inundated. That car there, partly submerged in the middle of the road.
So the point being, I just looked at it and I thought, holy shit, how many more times are we going to be seeing this in the next wee while? Because we tend to get caught up in the today and we forget about what's just been. I've got a family member who lives out in West Auckland, and this is the third. She's lucky and she hasn't had flooding, but this is the 3rd time since this has happened. out in QMU and out that sort of area. And I think earthquakes are different, but this is about the climate. This is about what's above us and falling on us. And you can't really deny, unless this is a spate, and in 5 years' time we're not having any of them, but you can't really deny this seems to be happening more and more and more and more and more. And I just thought, well, actually, look at this. This popped up on my feed last night. Obviously, my algorithm's finding West Auckland floods, and it showed me one. I went, holy shit, that was only a year ago, and this has just happened, and it's happening again more and more and more. I don't know. There's not really much to add to it other than to show people, like, this is what today is. This is our new future. This is how we're living today with these sorts of situations.
So I actually came across a very similar thing on Twitter today. Here is a picture from the Esk Valley flood 2018.
Right.
That was the biggest flood that they had on this property to date.
Yeah.
And this is yesterday.
Holy mackerel. The house is gone.
The house is underwater.
Go back. Okay. So the house is still there. It's just underwater.
Yeah.
Holy moly. And that was like, this is the that one there from 2018 was like, that's the worst we've ever seen. And then.
Oh, it can get worse.
Oh, man.
So yeah, I mean, this comes back to what we were talking about last night is, as the atmosphere and the seas heat up, whatever storms we're going to see are going to be carrying more moisture.
Yeah.
The other one that I thought was quite interesting, as I go back, from Kerry Allen's Instagram today. That's all that forestry slash that's just been dumped into the flood system. And pounded into these bridges.
So basically what happens is they cut down the trees. They basically leave up there the stuff they don't want, and they take away the stuff they do want, and the stuff that they don't want now turns into this. So what responsibility is this of the forestry companies, be it Fletcher's or whoever else, to clean the fuck up after themselves so this thing kind of doesn't happen again? Because this is wiping out bridges. Is that a massive gap in the bridge there? You can see kind of to the, right there. So if that's been caused by trees coming down the river, which has been caused by forestry companies leaving trees behind after they've cut them down, surely there's some culpability there.
Yeah, absolutely. And from what I'm reading is, if these forestry companies were made to clean up the slash somehow, it would basically make a lot of the land that they do the forestry on uneconomical. Yeah.
Well, I mean, how much more uneconomical is it going to be for that bridge to be out for 3 months while they rebuild it?
Well, exactly. If floodwater is one thing, when it's absolutely loaded with tons and tons of timber, that's destroying bridges and absolutely covering East Coast beaches.
Yeah,
and just unwanted wood.
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem to be working. Like so many things, when we start talking about climate change, maybe the way that we do things isn't any good anymore.
Well, this is a conversation that we should start to get into, but before we do that, let's just say hello and g'day to all our patrons. Thank you for joining us. If you're with us tonight, good to see you. If you're not with us, then we think about you in spirit. Is that right? Something like that anyway. So if you're involved with our patrons, as Chewy says, you are 22% better looking today than you were yesterday. And we want to thank you guys for being a part of what we do and helping us to continue to make independent news. If you'd like to be involved, then all you need to do is head to patreon.com/Big Hairy News. And I'm going to shout out one person today, to Rob Burney today, who changed his membership from an $8 a month to a $15 a month. So we appreciate everybody, but because Rob did that today, we're saying a special thanks to Rob as well. And a special thanks to everyone who you can see listed on the screen right now. As I said, patreon.com/Big Hairy Ballsy News, something like that. All right, so I think might be time to actually get in. It's time to get into the show, and it's probably an appropriate time to jump to it because you were talking about climate change. So let's jump to a conversation this morning off TVNZ Breakfast. and it's with Leader of the Opposition, Christopher Luxon. Now, it's interesting to hear what's going on here. It's interesting to hear that Christopher Luxon is basically simpatico in partnership with Labour over the response to close down Parliament for this week, completely contrary to what Mr. Seymour is all about. But there's another part about this which I want to get to, which is where Christopher Luxon, and I won't say national, but where Christopher Luxon is today on climate change. So let's have a bit of a listen.
We've copped back-to-back disasters this year, so with an election now on the way, is it time to point fingers or work collaboratively for some solutions? Nationals
Point fingers at the weather.
Luxon joins us for
What?
his take on the response to Cyclone Gabrielle. You've made it. You're nice and dry. The worst has passed. How have you fared over the last couple of days?
Oh, look, I mean, it's just been, the thing I just want to acknowledge is just New Zealanders. I mean, it's been incredible to think about the number of people that have been displaced from their homes. When you think about the communities that have been cut off, we've seen some absolutely heroic first responder work. And importantly, we've seen incredible emergency management. And I was in the bunker in Wellington yesterday afternoon, and just 200 people working endless hours, coordinating with local civil defence on the ground. So, you really are struck by how, the great response from Kiwis. And we've got to keep working hard at making sure our emergency response systems and processes keep getting better, which is important.
Good response. Well done, Leader of the Opposition. Thank the people of New Zealand. Thank the people who are doing the hard mahi out there. So good. Nothing, no complaints, no nothing. Appropriate response from Leader of the no notes. Keeping on going with Mr. Luxon.
There's a lot going on, and obviously Parliament's gone into a hiatus. Was that the right move?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Strong. That is a strong response. I don't mean strong like as in good. I mean, we're going to get to Mr. Seymour a bit later on today and what he talked about on Today FM. But yes, absolutely. So the Leader of the Opposition is aligned with Labour on this by saying the right thing to do was to shut down, put on hiatus Parliament.
It's not about politics this week. It's about New Zealand and New Zealanders. And I think it's important that the actual government ministers are actually full court press on actually an all of government response. First, to make sure that New Zealanders are being supported, and we've still got a lot of New Zealanders and under a lot of suffering. And then obviously starting to put your mind to the recovery. And there's no doubt, that we're going to need to make some, investments in climate adaptation and infrastructure, and we should want to do that in a bipartisan way.
Do you reckon that I've never really heard climate adaptation used? Is that a little bit of a, I know there's some people on the right who are going to not like the idea of climate change, so our buzzword is going to be climate adaptation, or do you reckon they're just using it technically because he's saying there needs to be changes made? Where do you sit on that, Chewy?
I don't mind that term, to be honest. I actually don't mind anything that he said so far, which really makes me worried for what's coming when you unpause it. But yeah, look, I think climate adaptation is,
well, we need to adapt.
If you're going to use a buzzword, that's a good one. I've got absolutely no criticism of it. Like, whatever the climate is going to do, we need to be able to adapt to it. So yeah, again, like, who's this guy?
This guy
Where's
is someone.
he been?
This guy is someone who has been watching the polls. Would be my
talking
guess.
about bipartisanship. And no criticism of the government. I thought he'd come out swinging, going, "Wow, it's not good enough that the government's just letting cyclones in." But yeah, no, this is the whole thing. When something like this happens, a leader of the opposition should be someone that literally seems like they could be prime minister. And this is the first time that I've seen him even take baby steps into it.
Yeah. All right, we'll keep going.
I want to get to that in a moment on those adaptations you talk about. But first of all, we've seen the ACT Party's David Seymour say that the government needs to be held accountable and there shouldn't be a hiatus. That's a pretty inflammatory sort of comment at this time.
Look,
needs to be held accountable for what exactly? This is the thing that I don't quite understand. Yeah. David Seymour says they need to be held accountable just exactly for what? You're holding them accountable for going out into the public and trying to help sort out people's issues right now. They need to be held accountable for that.
See, you've got to get in the head of an ACT supporter or an ACT member, even, Pat. And what you've got to realise is that the cyclone is just a convenient excuse for them to get out of Parliament, so they can get away from ACT questioning everything that they've done wrong. That's what he means. They've got to hold them to account.
It's a convenient excuse. It's a convenient excuse
it's technically
to.
genius.
I think it's a convenient excuse for Labor to turn our kids transgender. I think that's what their meaning is, isn't it? Something like that. Right.
What I loved about this, right, is Seymour went, we've got all of our MPs here ready to go, and everybody else is just skiving off. Like, it's not that they're going out to look after their electorates,
digging ditches, looking after people, helping things.
While he was saying that, one of his own MPs was heading back to their farm because of their livestock were at risk. So, yeah.
All right, let's keep going.
Seymour.
I personally, we supported the motion because we certainly.
But he could potentially be a partner for you in government. Is that a wise choice?
Around this particular issue, all I'd just say to you is we can gear up in Parliament next Tuesday, and we can, there'll be time for us to do that. But actually, right here, right now, when we've seen the images that we've seen over the last 48 hours, it's all about making sure that we're getting the support and the coordination to those local areas that we desperately need to get to.
How will you work with someone, though, who seems to contradict you on some? This is a really big issue, actually, for the country that we're facing. And the government is having to respond in a really major way. And someone is saying, well, that's not really that important.
Well, let's be clear. The election's a long way away. We don't need to be politicking this week. It's actually where I want everyone focused is actually on the New Zealand people.
Okay. Is this a man-made climate change disaster that is worse because of the impact of our industrialisation of the planet?
There's no doubt about it. Climate change is impacting and creating extreme weather events, and this is what this is definitely about.
Impact of man-made impact on
yeah, I mean, if you're a climate change denier at the moment,
you're
or
a
even a
science
minimalist,
denier, aren't you?
I just don't understand how you can hold that position, to be honest. And so for me, what I'm really focused on is actually, making sure that when you start to think about over the next multi-decades of investment that we're going to need to make sure that we can adapt to the climate change that we're experiencing, that's going to require us on quite a complex issue to actually work in a bipartisan way across all political parties. There'll be many governments over the next few decades, and it's important that we develop a framework to say, well, how are we going to deal with what is a very complex issue? Because as you think about rebuilding roads, we just don't want them washed out and wiped out in the next event. And so it's making sure that we actually, how do you actually pay for that? Is it insurers? Is it individual property owners? Is it councils? Is it local government? Is it this generation? Is it the next generation? So there's a lot of complexity to work through as we think about actually strengthening our infrastructure so that we can adapt to climate change.
But rebuilding roads and doing it in a way that they don't get washed out again, that's the ambulance, that's the after effect of climate change. What is your actual concrete policy about what we do to stop this getting worse?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's a number of things we need to do. I mean, first and foremost, be under no illusions, the National Party is deeply committed to net carbon zero 2050. That's why we supported that legislation.
The National Party is not deeply committed to that, but Mr. Luxon might be.
And that's why we supported the government on the emissions reductions budgets that they had last May. The means by which we deliver those ends might be slightly different. I think we need to start to talk a lot more about actually how we speed up the consenting of renewable green energy, for example. That's something that government can uniquely do to accelerate those developments and those investments. And a lot of it is actually about the speed of consenting. That's a good place for us to head to. Okay. I think there's a lot more that we could be doing around carbon capture. We see technologies and things around the world.
So we already have a lot of renewable energy, like well over 80%.
So at the same time, though, they're going to cancel the clean car option and all that sort of thing as well. So look, I guess what I'm saying is it's a different response than many national parties have given in the past. However, this is the thing that I find really interesting. Yeah. The national voter in general, not entirely, but in general, is one that doesn't want to hear about climate change. They don't want to hear about it. They don't want to worry about it. The farmers don't want to hear about it in general. I mean, yes, there are anomalies within those groups, but in general, they don't want to. They don't want to hear about it. They don't want to be told that your cows' burps and farts are ruining the environment. I'm paraphrasing with my tongue in my cheek slightly. They don't want to hear about it. So the really interesting thing about what's happening at the moment is there are a bunch of people who would love dearly to see Labor get out of politics. Remember, this Friday, joining us in the studio, we've got Byron Clark. He's going to be with us for the whole hour, and we're going to be talking his brand new book. This is a story from stuff.co.nz. Here's a really interesting part that Byron has talked about. There is definitely a lull at the moment. He's talking about the right-wing conspiracy theorists. Clark agrees, but the core group are still organizing, and he is noticing a pivot from COVID conspiracy to climate change conspiracy. So there is a voting bloc who are now pivoting, like the instigators, if you remember the Paula Penfold documentary, are pivoting from COVID conspiracies to climate conspiracies. So when you hear the leader of the opposition who is supposed to be the anti-Jacinda, if you will, who is supposed to be the person who leads us away from all this woke bullshit, talking about climate change, acknowledging that it's climate change, talking about if you're a climate change denier now, you're basically nuts, you don't believe the science. Where are they going to go with their vote? So we've talked before on the show about Luxon's dilemmas. He's got lots of dilemmas, and one of them that we talked about in the past is his views on abortion, right? That's a dilemma for him as to where he lands on that, because if he believes it to be murder, which he does, how can he therefore not bring legislation to get rid of abortion? Because any politician that could stop a murder happening should stop a murder happening. It's a dilemma for him. This is another dilemma for the right at the moment in general. We've talked about it with Karen Plunkett, yeah? They have for such a long time, and they are currently right now saying to this group of people, we need your vote. The people who are the conspiracy theorists, the people who are the COVID and now climate deniers. So what are they going to do when they're chasing some of those people away, because their next leader, their anti-Jacinda, if you will, is now all guns in when it comes to climate change? And I saw Chewy clapping along with what he was saying. I agree. We give bouquets where bouquets are deserved, no matter
Mark
who.
it on the calendar, because it's the first time it's happened. But yes.
What happens, what we do is we have a balance that we play each ball on its merits. In this instance, we would congratulate and uphold the words that Mr. Luxon is speaking. However, if you're an ideologue, if you're a zealot, then what happens is your end goal is all that matters. If this group who were at Wellington a year ago, who are the instigators who are now driving from, what do they call it? Something surfing. Like they're surfing the new conspiracy. This conspiracy surfing, basically. Yeah. They're now switching because their grift has stopped with the COVID stuff, because it's basically COVID's not over, but the restrictions around COVID are all over. They need to switch their grift to something else to still earn their money. So they're switching towards climate change. All of their followers will now want to have a bar of a man who believes that man-made climate change is the cause of this storm. Will not want to have a bar of someone who signed up to the net zero agreement. They won't want to have a bar of that person. So where do they go? So actually the dilemma that Luxon has given himself and the right in general is that the people that they need to vote for them now won't want to vote for them because of the sensible things they're saying around things like COVID. So the normal person will hear that and go, oh yeah, good, sensible. But the 3% of the vote, or the 2% of the vote, or the 4% of the vote who are way out there, who the right need, because none of them vote for the left, will now go to things like the Freedom and Outdoors Party, which will get 3%, and therefore their vote will be irrelevant. And that is fantastic for the left. Chewy.
Yeah. Again, I want to acknowledge that in my mind, where every politician is fair dealing, that is the sort of statement that I would want from the leader of the opposition. But if we use our memories, we go back, we had a lot of that at the start of COVID, and then it evaporated like so much smoke in the wind. And we went back to bitching and fighting, and you're not doing it right. I'm also weary of, as good as Luxon's statement was about climate change and needing to prepare for it and take action and all of that sort of stuff, his party, the party that he leads, has consistently voted against any policy to try and affect actual change. So it's great that he's saying it now. Maybe this is his come to Jesus moment.
He's had one of those, hasn't he? Isn't that the whole point?
And I'd love to see, our business focused party become, they always talked about the blue greens. Maybe they could do it themselves and become a teal party. I don't think they will.
No,
I think this is Luxon making a good call for his interview rounds this morning. I don't know if I trust it, and he has problems with people trusting what he's saying.
Yeah.
The only way to earn trust is to stick with what you're saying. Will we see that become more of an issue? He's made several statements today backing up the fact that we've got to look at climate change. He's on record now for the next couple of months.
Yeah.
So what goes with it? Words and action?
What we're going to do is we're going to get to, and you brought up climate change, COVID, And one of the things that I remember well, and I'm going to talk about this in the next block, so I won't get into it too much now, is what happened to Simon Bridges as the leader of the National Party when he started pissing and around what Labour was doing with COVID. So the leader of the opposition, I think if he jumped up and down right now, like a particular other party leader, which we're going to get to next, that could be part of his undoing. Now, I might get to it yet because we'll play it next because it kind of flows into it. But before we do, I can see that you've already marked sort of 9 of the text messages. Is there anything you want to put out there about what we're talking about right now before we get to it?
I think these are all referring to Luxon's statement.
Sure.
Carl here says climate adaptation is a clear pivot, but one that can allow them to not fully admit that they've been on the wrong side of this issue, even up to a few years ago, or even more recently than that, to be honest. Scott McGregor here says National has opposed every climate change initiative Labour and Greens have introduced.
Let me just speak to that. I agree, and we're not naive here, but what we do is play each ball on its merits, right? And so in this instance, in this singular instance, what he's saying and the words, because remember, leader of the opposition is putting out words to the public, and those words are being heard by people to make a decision this year on who they're going to vote for. It'd be very easy for him to continue to oppose it today. He's chosen not to. So in this singular incidence, we're congratulating where congratulations and supporting where support is done. But that doesn't take away from what Scott's saying, because the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and we'll find out what their pudding tastes like closer to the election.
I didn't like that sentence.
No, neither. No, that's why I shut it. I threw up in the back of my mouth a little bit.
Rowe points out, and he's speaking like a CEO confronting a serious issue and mostly getting it right for a change. I mean, it's worrying that this is what we're doing, is we're just pointing at him and going, oh, he's done it right.
Oh my goodness, this sounds sensible. How's this possible?
Paul points out that he did miss the chance to say consequences.
Climate
change
in my string.
Consequences.
Yeah,
which would be a great slogan. And Rob Burney here comes in and says renewable energy consenting. There is already more than enough consented renewable plants to take the New Zealand grid to 99% green. The power companies aren't building them though.
Right.
So yeah, it's stuff like that counts in the long run.
Something Kim already also says here is interesting. The floods have impacted a lot of farmers, hence the focus on climate. So in other words, that might still be a message to the farmers, even though it feels like it's to everybody. Nick says as well, blue-green is a national voter, is a national voter wishful thinking. And before we get out of the text as well, let me just say a big thank you to Kookie, who decided to pay the late entry fee. That's good. If you've come late, it's a $5, apparently, it's a $5 late entry
Fiver
fee.
in the bucket.
Fire in the bucket for your late entry. And if you're watching on demand, same thing. You can rent our
you're already late.
We're Blockbuster. You rent our video. So thanks,
just one comment before we move away from blue green.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think it's wishful thinking. I think the Green Party, you've got people who are, obviously environmentally focused, but also very left socially. It's the social, and I think there is space there for the benefit of everyone for someone that is, I care about the environment, I just have different opinions on some of the other stuff. I don't agree with those, but there are people out there that would fit into that mold. And at the moment, there's nothing for them to vote for.
Well, I think also when we think blue-green, we think a mix between National and the Green Party. But it wouldn't be that. I mean, I know everyone knows this, so I'm preaching to the choir here. It would be the national version of, focusing on ecology and the environment. So it would be a national greenie rather than Green Party. So blue-green still wouldn't be the Nationals doing what the Greens want to do. It would be the Nationals doing what the National Party wants to do with a slight leaning towards environmental issues. So, but it would still be a blue-green. And we've had this conversation in the last couple of days quite a bit, and I know some people in the chat are going to disagree with me again, but it feels like the conversation has pretty much moved away from is climate change a real thing or not? Pretty much. Now, I'm not saying there's not the odd lunatic out there, but it's now evolved a little bit from many on the right saying that, but we can't do anything about it, and the Earth has cycles. But I think that's a step forward, because I've done radio talkback since the early 2000s, right? And for a long time, not that long ago, there was a huge percentage of people who are like, it's not real. Whereas now it seems like the step forward is, yeah, it is real. And then there are some who will go, but we can't do anything about it. Or, but, it's just cycles. But at least we've got to the, but it is real. Because if we acknowledge it is real, these people who are still in the other camp a little bit, then we can go, okay, well, it's real. Even if I accept that there's nothing we can do about it, that's what you say. What shall we do to mitigate the next flood? Like, we can put things in place for that, because that flood's very real. Unlike Kate Hawkesby thinking it wasn't, most of us saw it and saw that it was. So at least we can start a conversation with some of these people who may not be deniers anymore, but might be, I don't know, skeptical of the reasons behind it, and say to them and work with them on what do we need to do to build spongy cities? What do we need to do to get rid of the, do you call it slag? Whatever the stuff is from the forestry slag? Slash. Well, these sorts of things, they're things that I think everybody can get on board with, even if we don't get to the point of, all getting into agreement as to why it's happening. If we at least focus on the it's happening, then it'll be something. May not be enough for most of us, but it'll be something.
Yeah. Paul's nailed it, maybe a little bit blunt. I care about the environment, but I also hate people. And all of their weirdness. I think that's very true. And I think Simon here has nailed it as well. There is a party that kind of fits that mold. It's TOP.
Gareth Morgan's gone, though. He would have been the biggest driver.
Well, Gareth
for
Morgan's
the brand.
mouth and his money is gone. They need the money. They don't need his mouth. But yeah, I mean, I looked at TOP when they first came out. They had some good ideas. And it was just that Gareth Morgan just would not shut up, that he really hurt them. And then he took his ball and went home, and has kind of left the remains of TOP just struggling to get anybody to pay them any attention. They've still got those good policies.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Let's move on, because we're still kind of talking about this, and we're talking about leadership and that. And this was brought up to us yesterday, and we hadn't heard of it. And one of the reasons we hadn't heard of it is, for some reason, Today FM didn't highlight this at all. I mean, this is a really big story. This was a really big story, but on Today FM's website, there wasn't any, there wasn't like you get onto the website and they're like, today we've been speaking to, we had to go into the full show from yesterday and then find the point where it is. Now, I want to talk about what David Seymour's up to at the moment. It's what Christopher Luxon has just done. This sounds really weird, but acknowledging the truth of climate change is going to drive some voters away from him. What David Seymour's doing at the moment as well is, I think, spending as much time as possible driving voters away from him. This is nothing but good for the left. Now, you may not be on the left. You don't have to be on the left to, listen to what we do, enjoy what we do, hate what we do, but watch. That's fine. We don't mind rage watching.
We'll take a hate click.
But we are, right? And so ultimately the policies and the ideologies that sit on the left, and I'm not going to say a party because I can go kind of anywhere in the left, are ones that sit with our ideologies better. We do walk and chew gum at the same time. We don't carry water for anybody. As you've just heard, we've been very complimentary of Mr. Luxon tonight. But ultimately, if you're looking overall, I think it's fair to say that both Chewy and myself, and probably many people watching, would like to see the left succeed above and beyond the right. So what David Seymour's doing at the moment, let me just say to you, I think is going to help the left. And if he continues to do it, may really, really help the left. Let's have a listen to the conversation he had with Lloyd Burr yesterday.
This is the Leaders Podium on Lloyd Burr Live.
Joining us today on our Leaders Podium is the ACT Party leader, David Seymour. Welcome to the show, David. Sorry we've come to you a little bit late, but I saw a story about you today saying that the Labour Party loves disaster politics. What on earth are you on about?
Well, you've seen a declaration of a national state of emergency. I asked the Minister for Civil Defence in Parliament today what made the difference that he declared it today and not yesterday. There was no clear reason. I gave
the answer to that is being fully informed is the answer to that, and that answer has been given out several times.
Some examples of situations that local emergency management departments have dealt with, and I asked how could central government have dealt with that. He said, well, they were doing a good job and they won't necessarily get any more resources. And I think people might ask, well, what was the purpose of this? And what is the purpose of closing Parliament? I know people say, oh, well, it's just political point scoring, but it actually worries me that people in a time of disaster when the government has additional powers are less concerned about having a parliament functioning and asking questions. I actually think it's important that happens.
So Mr. Seymour is saying very clearly, I want to be able to ask my questions in the House. And if I can't ask my questions in the House, that's not fair. And they're all back in their constituencies, helping their local constituencies, and they should be down here so I can ask my question. That's basically what Seymour's doing, because that's what he's saying. He's saying in a time like this is his position, yeah? Think about this as a leader. In a time where there is a national state of emergency, just like there was for the Christchurch earthquake when the ACT Party supported a national state of emergency, when there's a national state of emergency, David Seymour thinks the politicians should all be in the House debating rather than in their constituents helping. That's what he thinks they should be. Or he doesn't think it and he's just being an asshole to try and score political points. Being the person who will claim others are doing things politically whilst he does them politically, which I think is a point Lloyd actually makes as we go through this.
But Labor seem very happy to go through a week of no parliament, declaring a state of national emergency without a clear reason. And I just can't help avoid the possibility that actually they like it this way, in spite of how tragic it is.
Hang on. So what you're saying is that they didn't need to declare a national state of emergency. They could have just kept it as local states of emergency, but they've done this because they like disasters and they like the coverage that they get because of the disasters?
I've asked the minister, what...
You know what projection is, eh? What he's actually saying is, I don't like the coverage I'm not getting. That's what projection is. See, the government of the day, be it John Key during the Christchurch earthquake or Labor today, when there is a natural disaster, they front up because they make the decisions. So when David Seymour says they like the attention, what he's saying is, I'm not getting enough attention. That's classic projection. And I don't know if I could lose much more respect for David Seymour, but this is, in my opinion, revolting. It's like the worst of the worst. There is still yet to be a salient point made by Mr. Seymour as to why there A, shouldn't be a national emergency, and B, why Parliament needs to sit this week, especially when Christopher Luxon says, no, we completely agree with the government. Parliament should stop national state of emergency. It's really, really, really strange, unless he's a double agent.
What difference has it made practically to people on the ground struggling and trying to get help? He doesn't have an answer to that. We've asked why logically Parliament can't be functioning and they don't have an answer to that. I think what really matters is that there's a lot of people in incredibly desperate situations, and it's not obvious how declaring a state of national emergency as opposed to local and closing the Parliament actually helps with that. But what it will do is it means that much as the way the value put on education has taken a step back in the last few weeks with random closures of schools when it wasn't necessary, we've also done the same thing with democracy. And I unfortunately think while it may not be
all of democracy.
It's been closed. Remember what he said? He says, like we closed school, the same has been done with democracy. So David Seymour, this guy's a fucking moron. He honestly is coming out trying to sell the point that democracy has been closed down, just like the schools in the flood.
This is a point that they made all the way through COVID, was that the COVID response was a threat to democracy. And also they complained about the daily briefings, because it put the Prime Minister front and centre in our living rooms every day. And that was just obviously politicking.
Yeah.
It shows his mindset. This guy reminds me of some of the worst wannabe lawyers from high school, like the debate club nerds. They're like, oh, miss, we haven't been given homework today.
Pick me.
Like, he's just... I'm going to take a note from you, Pat. It is my honest held belief that David Seymour is the biggest dingus that wilks this country.
All right, let's play a bit more from the biggest dingus.
Be politically popular to advocate for Parliament in the time of crisis. It's something that needs to be done.
I mean, I think this is just one of those things that you're just going to have to suck it up. I mean, in 2011, when the ACT Party was in a confidence and supply agreement with the National Party declared a national state of emergency following the Christchurch earthquakes.
Yeah, that was just one.
The Labour Party and the opposition didn't kick up a fuss about that then. It just feels as though while you're accusing them of playing politics with a disaster, isn't that essentially what you're doing?
Mm-hmm.
But hang on, but Lloyd actually missed a point. The Labour Party didn't put up a stink about that. But what he didn't say is, and by the way, Mr. Seymour, you agreed to it. That's the thing. Even though he said ACT was supplying confidence, it's like, but hang on, but you were on board with the government that did this when they did this.
Given you're using this disaster to say that they're playing politics with the disaster, which is essentially the same thing.
No, what I'm advocating for is sensible, practical measures to get help to people who need it right now. That has been done by local.
Nothing in this conversation has been offered by Mr. Seymour that offers a sensible or a practical solution for helping people. Nothing in this conversation. All this conversation has been is, I'm not getting enough airtime. That's all it's actually been. All it's been.
Very well. Yesterday, the minister can't explain what is different today. That's, first of all, what is most important here is those people who are at risk and losing what they need, get their help. The next question is, does what the government is doing make sense? And I actually think that it's our role as an opposition to question that, raise those questions and have the parliamentary forum to do it. They've taken that away, and there's not actually a logical reason.
Well, they haven't. They've just delayed it by a week. You'll be able to do that next week. I mean, it's better to have, isn't it better to have your leaders and those making decisions out and about dealing with this disaster rather than just sitting in a building in Wellington?
Yes.
Well, I don't think it's an either or. It's actually an and. So, for example, we had the Minister for Emergency Response Civil Defence in the House today answering questions. That was an hour out of 24. He's still got 23 others. I think that possibly he could do more than just one thing. So again, you can say, look, democracy doesn't matter, Parliament doesn't matter, having
democracy
elected
doesn't
representatives
matter.
there asking questions on people's behalf doesn't.
These fucking communists, Shuey. These communists who just think democracy doesn't matter because they've delayed Parliament by 4 days. And just what's going to happen on Tuesday when they reconvene again is they're going to do a coup. And in the coup, they're going to actually get everybody arrested from the opposition. And then they're going to take power for the next 12 years because democracy. Hang on. I'm getting a bit emotional. Democracy doesn't matter. Democracy is under attack.
Western civilization.
Part of the problem, and I know that everyone who votes for ACT is not a moron, but lots of morons do vote for ACT. They'll fucking eat this up. That's one of the problems here. They'll eat this up and they'll think that democracy is under attack. And this is like an example of ground zero for dis and misinformation. What he's doing now that then flows into blog pieces and and Twitters and Facebook posts about this government's anti-democracy because they went to help people in their constituents rather than holding Parliament where we wanted to talk to them and have our questions answered.
Do you think this is just a case of that we need to learn what code word activates David Seymour? Like it's in the Marvel movies where you just have to lean in and go, "Hail Hydra," and he'll tell us the master plan. He'll clue us in.
Let's get to the end of this, and then we'll share off what's actually what's happening, what could happen at the moment from this kind of bullshit that he's doing.
Matter, you can say all that.
No, but I'm not saying that. I mean, it does matter. I just think that there is a state of emergency. There's lots of parts of the country that are absolutely wrecked at the moment, and the ministers would have had so many advisors and so much advice coming into him. He was meant to be on Tova this morning at 8:48 or something like that, but he had to delay it because he was announcing a national state of emergency. But if you can find me proof that he's done this because he wants to look strong and Labor wants to look good in a disaster, then that'll be a huge scandal. But at this stage, I don't think they're playing politics with this.
And I simply put it back to you need to ask, what exactly have they done by proroguing or cancelling Parliament and declaring
Okay, we're done with him because he's a twat. What have they done with parading or cancelling Parliament? You got the gist of it. Now let's just get to some of the analysis here, yeah. And we talked about Simon Bridges with COVID. This is really an interesting thing to watch over the next few weeks. Just to remind you, quite close to the start of COVID, Simon Bridges came out on Facebook and he went, "What's with all these lockdowns? Let's open the borders." And New Zealand en masse, including lots of national people, went, "Pull your fucking head in." And that incident directly led to his popularity dropping and him being ousted as leader. There is no question that that one Facebook post ruined his chance to potentially be prime minister and certainly to remain the leader of the opposition. In the last week, David Seymour, God bless his communist heart, Comrade Seymour, is basically eliminated any possibility of working with Te Pāti Māori, which means that coalition partner is gone from a national act situation. And now he's putting out there at a time where there are 225,000 people without power. I think I saw 10,500 people who are removed from their homes, that Labor's playing politics, all while Labor is doing everything they can to help people and sort this out. I just wonder how much this will drive some people, 1%, 2%, 5%, 10%, away from this. What was that word? Dingus? Because much like Simon Bridges got it so wrong around COVID, David Seymour has it so very wrong around this right now. When you've got a journalist host saying you're just playing politics, you've got it wrong, you know you've gone somewhere. And this is not an opinion person. Lloyd Burr is a journalist, news and current events host. He's not offering opinions. And when you get the non-opinion people speaking as bluntly as that, you're like, you guys aren't reading the room. You've got this wrong, Mr. Seymour. And again, the reason I joke about him being a double agent is this will do nothing but help the left. Chewy.
Yeah. No, I agree. I can't see no, I can see who he's pitching to. He's pitching to the people that have been lapping up this democracy is under attack all the way through COVID. There's just no point unpicking what he said because it's just insane. He thinks that the disaster response is better served if he, the singular champion for democracy that we have, gets to put someone's feet to the fire in Parliament instead of responding to this. It's just it's main character energy is what he is. He's the hero of his own story, and he wants us all to know it.
Simon says here that he disagrees with me. I'm assuming Simon's saying he disagrees with me on Te Pāti Māori not maybe potentially going with them, that he could go with them if the numbers add up. I tell you why I don't think that's the case. I'm not the right person to give all the details on what it means to have mana and to not be embarrassed or not to be spoken down to. But the way that David Seymour the other day basically said live on air that Rawiri Waititi is not to be trusted and people should watch what he's up to. I honestly can't see it. I can't see it. Now, you're right, Simon. I could be wrong. You know, I don't have a crystal ball that's that good. If I did, I'd be a lotto winner every week. But I can't see it. I can't. And look, I was someone who last year went, maybe, you know, they went with John Key, maybe. And I just can't see. I can't see the distance that he's putting between him and the Māori Party's sort of objectives, you know, because you can be it's like we talk about being on the same page. You know, you need to be in at least the same chapter, even if you're not on the same page. But at the moment, ACT and the Māori Party are not only on different books, but they're on different books in different libraries. You know, and I don't see how you could cross that chasm. And the other thing to remember is the last time the Māori Party went with National, it didn't end well with them. Their supporters didn't like it, and they almost ended up being gone forever from Parliament. So that will be a part of it now. And I have to say to you, I think that the ACT Party today is exponentially scarier and worse to the average Māori voter than the National Party of John Key were. So I don't see it. Look, happy to, Simon, mark this date down, whatever it is, 15th of the 2nd, and come back to me at the end of the year. If I'm wrong, I'll stump up to it. We do that all the time, but I can't see it. And I think that David Seymour in particular is adding to the woes of National losing potential partners. So I actually think David Seymour in particular this week has done two things that potentially will certainly have today, but potentially will on election day help the left. And that is nail in the coffin for the Māori Party, in my opinion, and also reading the room wrong around this natural disaster where he's basically going, Labor's playing politics, when actually Labor's doing all the right things at the moment. The government's doing all the right things at the moment, and the National Party agrees with them.
Maybe this is the time that the ACT Party needs to consider swapping out David Seymour for their other David Seymour. Let's give him a go.
Yeah,
I'll remind people that if you look at the ACT Party list, there is another David Seymour.
I wonder if that was him on the phone. Did they sound alike? Imagine that. That'd be quite funny, isn't it? On a party, David Seymour from ACT. Hello? Hello? Hang on. Which one?
Things are going badly.
Which
Roll
one
out
is it?
the stunt Seymour.
All right. Is there anything we want to get to in the text? Here, lots of people talking. I particularly like Scott's comment as well. There you go. That's the always comment. Carl says, democracy is under attack. Western values, Judeo-Christian values, less dog whistles and more fog horns at this point.
It's always a slippery slope to some sort of Stalinistic form of government with them.
Unless it's calculated, right? And let's just flesh this out. It could be calculated with Christopher Luxon being so open and honest from his perspective about where he stands, and he's taking national on climate change, for example. Maybe, ACT is pushing to that barrow to try and get the people who now he wants to vote for him and stay away from like the Freedom and Outdoors Party or the Brian Tamaki Party or the, whatever party. And they might end up looking to get that 3% extra then to put them from a sort of 9% party to a 12 or 15% party, which, could get them there. I'm still very, very much not saying that Labour's going to win this election. Let's get that clear. But what I am saying is that here's something, Cheryl, you'll probably agree with this. The difference between how we feel about Labour's chances in December of last year and Labour's chances now feel to me to be exponentially different.
Yeah. No, I think you're right there. I mean, if we go back, however many weeks it was to Jacinda's resignation, there was a lot of unknowns in there, and I think the last couple of weeks have really shown us what they've got in the tank, and it looks pretty good. Like I'm more confident now than I was.
Yeah.
Like and I even as early as last night I said there's not going to be a snap election. Less confident on that position.
Well, I
can see
the argument as to why. I don't know if it's going to happen, but like I said to you last night and to all our lovely people, and thank you, JN, for the super chat. We appreciate it. If you're going to send us a super chat, guys, make sure you use it as an opportunity to share a view or an opinion as well. I mean, we're very happy to take your super chat, JN. We appreciate that. But, you can also put a message in there so we can get, in fact, one day in the future, maybe we'll only take super chats as comments. I don't think so. But as we said last night, the idea of a snap election, I don't know if it'll actually happen, but if it did happen sooner rather than later, I think the New Zealand First is gone. They might be gone anyway, but they wouldn't get the traction in the next, say, 6 weeks to get in again. And it's an interesting time. I don't know. I don't change the late fee. Thank you. Yeah, if you're late tonight, so the late fee's just gone up by 100%. Maybe that means because the late fee for quarter past was $5 and for quarter two was $10.
Yeah.
You better not join us at 10 p.m. The late fee will be $20 by then. Is that I think that, okay, so I'll just say the way I feel is it was Nationals to lose in December of last year. That's how we were feeling. I don't know what's quite happened. Obviously, the change of leadership has done whatever it needed to do in the base, and National is misstepping. And let's get to this conversation now. Bryce Edwards' piece in the New Zealand Herald. And it now feels much more like a 50-50. Like it really does. It really feels like I would have said 60-40. It now feels like a 50-50. And really, they've done nothing other than change the leader and basically, I mean, like, to be honest, I don't really like that they've thrown all these policies under the bus, because some of the policies were good and worthwhile, but I guess they're going, if we're going to put any of our policies, then we need to win. And that's what they're focusing on right now. I don't like it. I don't like how it's planned out, but I guess, Chewy, if we're going to go that our preference would be a left-leaning, left-wing government, I mean, there's no point in them being in opposition. So I'm not saying therefore I like it, because there's a part of me which also goes, if you kind of give up your core beliefs, then what are you left to stand for? If you stand for nothing, you fall for anything. And they've pulled away from some of the things they stand for. I don't like that from an ideological point of view, but maybe from a pragmatic point of view, it's the way to go. I don't know.
Oh, look, and I'll be the first to say, like, if Labor get back in, we'll probably be looking back on this, Chippy swinging the axe at a whole bunch of policies that we weren't super happy about him going around it, and we'll go, oh, genius move, just genius tactical move.
Yeah.
And
then the day after they get in, they'll put them all back in place. That'll be the thing. You watch Labor will be going, they'll put them all back in. That's what the next line will be. Three waters will all come back. They'll all come back. And I'm like, hope so. But fingers crossed. But yeah, let's just slide into this now as well. And I know we've already talked about Christopher Luxon tonight, but this is more about an opinion piece by Bryce Edwards. It's quite long, and we are going to read quite a bit of it. Forgive me if my dyslexia kicks in, and I'm going to lean over to see it a bit more easily. But we're going to go through this because Chewy, I'm basically doing this to give Chewy a victory lap because, we all know how much he loves his view on this. Yeah. Shall I put you in full screen again?
Is this every time there's a story that suggests might
Dr. Bryce Edwards, Christopher Luxon's leadership is under threat. The National Party will be desperate to avoid a repeat of the leadership musical chairs of 2020 when they rolled Simon Bridges as leader and replaced him with Todd Muller, only for Muller to step down after 53 days, leading to Judith Collins taking the party into the election. But National will currently be considering whether a move needs to be made against leader Christopher Luxon, who continues to struggle and stumble. The party must be tempted to replace him with his high-performing deputy Nicola Willis, who might be better able to take on Prime Minister Chris Hipkins. Panicked changes in leadership don't generally project stability and unity to the public. However, proponents of a leadership change in National may well point to Labour's changing from Andrew Little to Jacinda Ardern just 7 weeks before the 2017 election, which has turned out rather well. Now, first point, Chewy. I tell you why I still don't think they can change the leadership and won't change the leadership. Because basically everything that Christopher Luxon has been saying about the change, it's the same party just with different leader, then they will be guilty of themselves.
I mean, they're guilty of it now.
Well, but not as much. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's plausible, and that's one of the reasons why. Because they will just know that if they do that, it will be the musical chairs. It'll be this is the 17th leader in the past 6 years for National. It will be, I feel like once they've made that decision for that boat, the way it's going to go, then they should go with it. I still think that. Now, I don't know. You're going to be unbearable should he be toppled.
Oh, smug overload, like sickening levels of smugness.
You can do the show by yourself that week, and the whole time you can just sit there smiling.
You've got to be here, otherwise I wouldn't enjoy it as much.
All right, let's go on. Poor polls for National and Luxon. Luxon's leadership simply isn't working, says Bryce Edwards. He had a good year in 2022. He managed to unify the party and provide a fresh contrast to Ardern, but that novelty appears to have faded fast, especially now that Ardern has left. What's more, although Luxon managed to significantly improve National polling in 2022, the improvements have stalled, and his personal poll ratings, which will cause, as has his personal poll ratings, will be cause for alarm in the party. All recent opinion polls have shown support for National decline. Now, remember, sorry, my little interjection here. We've talked several times about the Orewa speech with Don Brash and how they did this. And then it just started to do this. And this National Party is they didn't quite get the same bump that Don Brash's speech gave them, but they are following that pattern. It's a bit like, they're talking about, we expect a bump with Hipkins, a new leader. Well, they've had their bump as well. And now maybe that's leveling out a little bit. Luxon's preferred Prime Minister's support has also declined in recent polls, but the more concerning result in the Courier poll, which we've talked about, Chewy, you can find that and bring it up again if you want, was Luxon's net favourability rating, the percentage of voters with a favourable opinion minus those with an unfavourable opinion. Luxon fell to negative 5%, down from negative 1%. In contrast, Chippy's net favourable was 27, plus 27. Other recent polls. So in other words, if this was a presidential run, Hipkins would wipe the floor with him. That's what that basically says. If you were voting for a president. Other recent polls have had similar bad news for National. According to the latest News Hub poll, whilst 53% said they trusted Hipkins, only 37% said the same for Luxon, with 44% saying they actually distrusted Luxon. This is a serious problem because leaders who aren't trusted struggle to win elections. Chewy, yours.
Yes. Yes, I'm sorry, I've been flailing around trying to find that graph again, and I can't.
All right, no dramas.
But yeah, it's in the latest round of Curia polls if you guys want to look it up. Yeah, well, if your stats are just going down, if you're not liked by your own party, like surely there's got to be people shuffling around going, okay, we've changed leaders a couple of times now, it's not a good look, but neither is this. What we're doing is not working. People don't believe this guy. Who have we got that people would believe more? Now, my own biased opinion is that they've got nothing.
Well, Nicola Willis, she seems pretty impressive. I mean, we watched her a couple of times in the House last year, and she actually looked like a leader in the House.
True. She's the top of a very short list, though.
Yeah, and she is also the skinniest kid at Fat Camp. You know, they're not particularly attractive to say that that's the best choice. Let's have a look what else they're saying, because then we're going to our mate Matthew Hooton. National Party insider Matthew Hooton recently wrote a paywalled column titled "Don't Rule Out National Leadership Change Before Election." He argues that, quote, Luxon is very much struggling in the job, end quote. As a result, quote, National should be very worried. He suggests that Nicola Willis would do a much better job, although having an ugly leadership spill could be a disaster for National. Hooton says a carefully managed change, please, could become a necessity if the polls continue to show Luxon is not working out. If 3 months hence he is still struggling to connect and the polls are still consistently suggesting National Act will fall short of 61 seats, then perhaps National will need to consider a sophisticated managed leadership handover of the sort Labour has achieved. Confounding expectations, new Prime Minister Chris Hipkins has had an amazingly successful start, grabbing the agenda and projecting his government as something new. He's hardly put a foot wrong since being carefully placed into the role at the start of the year. In contrast, commentators are describing Luxon as looking flat-footed in response to the arrival of Hipkins to the top job. With his bonfire of reforms, Hipkins has been, I like that bonfire of reforms, Hipkins has been removing all the unpopular and distinctive policies that differentiated National from Labour. Luxon has been doing really well for months, banging on about the cost of living, and Ardern was on the back foot. Now Hipkins has fully embraced economic issues, leaving National behind. Shall I keep going? Oh no, you can do anything on there? Or shall I keep going? There's a couple more.
Yeah, look, I just want to say one thing, going back to Matthew Hooton. Now, what he's suggesting there is someone has the integrity that Andrew Little had to realise that he didn't have the snuff to win the election and hand it off to Jacinda.
Yeah,
they're hoping for that to happen. Now, national history suggests that that isn't going to happen. I can't imagine Luxon having the wherewithal to decide to step aside for someone who's got a better chance to win. I don't think, like, to do something like that, you have to be a true believer, party first sort of guy.
Yeah.
And I don't get that from Luxon at all. Luxon wants to be prime minister.
It's a little bit like,
that's the goal.
It's a little bit like, oi, come here. Where are you going? Get on your mat. Sneaking out of my room. It's a little bit like as well, I think, for Luxon, and particularly those on the right, that, you know, one of the things that was most offensive in America to those on the left, especially to those on the right, especially those on the right consider themselves kind of the strong man, is this frail old Joe Biden smashed this guy who thought he was I got the biggest brain, I got the best words, you know, this guy. And I wonder on some level, maybe not to quite the same extreme, but how embarrassing it would be for Luxon to have to step aside as well. I mean, he's the guy who's been telling us for a year he's the one to use it forward. He's the guy who knows business, that this Labour Party is doing it wrong. He's the guy to do it right. And then if the country goes, yeah, nah, I don't know if I don't know, maybe he does. I don't know him, but it feels that would be the biggest slap in the face. That would be like, I don't know how you'd come back from that embarrassment. You couldn't even get over this weak-ass bunch of woke lefties who want to, you know, teach all our kids about gender and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? I'm being facetious, but that's the vibe of a lot on the right. Like these weak, you know, the Nancy boys, the soy boys and girls can't do anything, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, but they're beating you. And they're doing better than you. So what does that say about you? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. More to the article. Houghton complains that National under Luxon appears to want to just emulate John Key's success, but empty 2008 election campaign that promised ambition and a brighter future. But Houghton says in 2023, voters are furious about empty sloganeering, so this simply won't work. Instead, voters want substance. And Houghton says Luxon has said or done nothing so far to give voters any confidence he has any. Herald political editor Claire Trevette, I believe it is, has also written about how Luxon desperately needs to lift his game, saying it's no longer enough for Luxon to rely on people getting sick of Labour or to roll out the same old lines he was using against Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, that the Labour government cannot deliver and is out of touch with New Zealanders' concerns. She says that although Hipkins has appeared obviously hungry to win, Luxon has not. He needs to change that, and he needs to change it fast. Luxon's authenticity problem. Right-wing political columnist Damien Grant says the problem with Luxon is his lack of authenticity. Grant has painted a picture of a leader who will just do and say whatever he thinks Middle New Zealand wants him to hear. Now, reflect that back to what we heard him saying on breakfast this morning about climate change. Just, put those two things together and think, is he just saying what he thinks Middle New Zealand wants to hear or not? And ultimately, says Damien Grant, the public doesn't respect that. Finally, even in the short term, the public needs to know that National is going to campaign on this year. Below is a leaked communication from inside National about what they have been planning as their key messages to voters in the campaign. Quote, National will deliver results so that all Kiwis will get ahead and New Zealand achieves its potential. In an unstable international environment, National will strengthen New Zealand's economy so we can reduce the cost of living, lift incomes for all, build infrastructure for the future, restore law and order, deliver better frontline services, and unite New Zealand, stop the division. That last one is hilarious coming from National, but there's nothing new in that. I mean, that's National of the 90s. I mean, we talked last night about people are scared that they're going to get National from the 90s. Those headlines, cost of living, incomes for all, build infrastructure, restore law and order, deliver better frontline services, is Jim Bolger. So what is it?
Find me one person in this country that believes National when they say we're going to lift incomes for all.
Yeah, true. Well, it's trickle-down economics, Chewy. It works, doesn't it?
Also, can we just talk about the quality of political commentator they have talking about National? You got Matthew Houghton, whose sole skill set seems to be picking losers. And then Damien Grant, who's a convicted fraudster. Like, who finds these people? And then you got Cameron Slater skulking around in the background.
Yeah, but he's gone. I've had some dealings with Cameron in the past, and I used to do some stuff with him on radio, but he's gone. He's down the anti-vaxxer, lockdown mandate sort of line now. That's where his world
Shocking.
Seems to be.
Can't believe it's happened to him. He was the best of us.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I should say this, which means I'm going to say it. I once had a friend of mine comment to me when he saw this is when like the dirty politics whale oil sort of thing, and you saw pictures of Cameron Slater in the news. He goes, I've never seen a person that looks more like his hands just reek of semen more than I have of Cameron Slater. And every time he's mentioned, my mind goes to that comment. It's disgusting.
Well, you mentioned him, so you must have wanted to have that picture in your head. Right. What's first of all, your thoughts around this? This is back to the leadership of Christopher Luxon. Mm-hmm. And here's the other thing, yeah? The other thing is voters are fickle. And what voters hear in the public sphere, on radio, what they read, what they see, influences them. What they're seeing at the moment is Luxon hasn't got it. And they're seeing it from a lot of places. Yeah. And what happens is there is a thing within the voting sector is you want to back a winner, right? Very much so you want to back a winner. And I'm not saying Luxon is a lehu there. But he's being portrayed as someone who can't get things done, who is unlikable, who is untrustworthy a lot in the media at the moment. And I wonder if there is a snowballing effect that people then go, oh, he's untrustworthy. Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, yes, I'll tick untrustworthy. And it will snowball and get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. But the floor is yours, Mister. I think they'll be gone by lunchtime. What do you reckon?
No, I think you're right. I mean, it's often a trap with political tragics such as ourselves, is that everybody is looking real deep into all of these issues and going back to statements they've made in the past and trying to draw a logical line of behavior. A lot of people just don't. They're not that engaged in politics, but they will read the headlines, they will read the blurbs, and they will put together, oh, this is the fourth article I've seen, fourth headline I've seen saying that Luxon's in trouble. Well, I don't want to vote for someone that's in trouble.
Yeah, I don't want to attach my wagon to that sinking ship. I think I just used a double analogy there, but you know what I'm saying. Yes, so very interesting. There's a few chats there that you've marked up. Do you want to get them out there?
Yep, Gareth H. He forgot to list tax cuts for the rich. So something off. Also, the fact that list was leaked. Again, like they don't have a tight enough ship to keep that stuff. Like, I mean, it's not.
But if it was,
earth-shaking stuff,
exactly. If it wasn't leaked, you'd be able to probably come up with 3 or 4 of those yourself without even thinking about it.
Yep. Craig Crabstyle, love the name. I never underestimate Hooten or his skills.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. Now I'm wondering if that's the skill that I'm talking about, his ability to pick losers. But we'll see. We'll see. And I think that's all I've really got there at the moment.
Let's just do this first of all. Here we go. Thanks to our patrons. Love to have you on board. And can I say hello and good evening to Gareth Wallace, who during the show tonight has signed up to be a patron, I believe, on the fuel level, $8 patron on the fuel level. So for those who don't know, the fuel level is fuck you Elon level, because we did that when he decided to have to give out ticks you have to buy a tick on Twitter, which I unfortunately have bought. One of the reasons I bought it is so I could upload video. It's the only reason, actually. In fact, I think I put a 9-minute video up today from one of our conversations last night on Twitter. So yes, I'm paying Elon, but I'll make this pledge to you. None of the patrons, super chats, or anything that come through will ever go towards Elon. I'll make that pledge to you. I'll pay it from other money elsewhere. But thank you, Gareth, for becoming a patron just tonight. We really appreciate you jumping on board and being a part of the team. If you're interested in being a part of what we do, if you've watched the show tonight and you've enjoyed the commentary and you think, yeah, this is the kind of thing we need more of this year, then one way you can actually get involved and help us is to visit patreon.com/Big Hairy News. Now, last thing, Chewy, for the night, seeing that sort of the news stuff done. Have you done episode 5 yet of The Last of Us?
I have, yes, because it came out early last week because of the Superb Owl. And
what do you think? Episode 5. No spoilers.
No, I loved it. It's just getting better and better. Yeah, without saying too much, absolutely love Melanie Linsky's character.
Yeah.
Loved it.
Yeah.
To have just her finishing speech was amazing, and just to have someone so disconnected but also channeling a kindergarten teacher at the same time was just a level of ick that I really wasn't prepared for.
I'm still a little bit confused.
Keeps on knocking it out of the park.
Do you know how she was looking for the guy? What was his name? Harry or Terry or
Henry.
I'm still a little bit confused as to why she was so keen to find him.
Because
was it about her brother?
Yeah, so Henry was a collaborator to get medicine for his brother who had leukemia.
Right.
And the only thing that was a juicy enough piece of information to get those pills was that he knew who the leader of the resistance was, which was her brother. So that's why he was public enemy number 1, the only thing that mattered through the whole thing for her.
Yeah. Disaster Piece says that her character is a post-apocalyptic Karen.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
I do say as well, I mean, did you watch Walking Dead in the earlier days?
I didn't. I wanted to. I was a big fan of the comic book before the show came on, and 2 or 3 episodes in. Like the first episode of Walking Dead is shot for shot one of the comic books, and it's amazing. And then they just went on a whole different direction, and I didn't like it, and it just became zombie kill of the week pretty much. After that,
I'm struggling. I'm not struggling with The Last of Us. I love it. It's good. My partner went out tonight, and I said, "Oh, so I'll be watching it by myself tonight, will I?" And she went, "No," and so we had to watch it before she went out. But I'm not struggling, but I remember the first 3 or 4 series of Walking Dead quite fondly. The very first episode when he wakes up in the hospital and the world has changed, I was like, this is really interesting. And the little tweaks in Walking Dead, like when they figure out that actually this is Walking Dead, so spoilers, it's been out for 5 years, that actually everyone's infected. Whereas in The Last of Us, it's like once people are dead, they're dead. I like the angle in Walking Dead. So I'm still probably unfairly comparing them. But I am enjoying it for its own standalone, but it's hard not to. And there's a lot out there at the moment, which is that post-apocalyptic. And I have to struggle as well because, not struggle is the wrong word, but everything that's post-apocalyptic at the moment, I compare to Double Tap, Zombieland, because it's like one of my favorite movies of all time. So, but yeah. All right. So there's also people commenting or watching it. And then Nick Kooky says that episode 3 is going to win all the histories. Probably. What's his name? Ron from Parks and Recreation.
Ron Swanson. Yeah.
Ron Swanson.
As far as I'm concerned, and this is my own personal head,
he'll win an Emmy for that.
That was Rob Swanson.
All right.
Like,
he'll win an Emmy for that.
Parks and Rec and Last of Us, same universe.
Because you can get Emmys for best guest slot in a show. He'll win an Emmy for that.
I mean, I think the thing with Last of Us, right, is it is only going to be 2 seasons.
Oh, is that right? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it is because there's only 2 games, and they've said season 2 is going to be the storyline from the second game. But yeah, it's already plotted. It already has its arc. It makes sense. It's been out there for ages, and people really like the storyline. And I'm a big fan of like, let's get out there and tell the story we want to tell, and then walk away.
Yeah.
Don't go, oh shit, ratings are still pretty good. Let's
I agree.
Season 3.
I agree. And I think that's what the British do so much better than the Americans. Like, like The Office in the UK versus The Office in America. Office in America, I think, was probably a superior product until it got to the point where like Michael left and they just kept on for another season. It's like, it's time to stop. You should stop. And I agree with Gareth here, actually, talking of Walking Dead. The first few seasons up to and including Negan was great. That's about where I dropped out as well, Gareth.
I dipped back into Walking Dead when I heard that they were bringing the Negan storyline in, because that was my favorite part of the comics.
Right.
And I think the actor that played Negan did it perfectly. They executed some of those storylines were a lot more faithful to the books than the series had been that I'd seen.
Right.
And then they lost me again.
Right.
So,
all right. Speaking of losing us, thank you for being involved tonight, team. Thank you for those couple of people who sent through super chats. We appreciate that. That does actually help. Every little bit sort of helps to pay the bills and pay the power and, pay for this product we use now called StreamYard, which is like $70 a month. It all adds up and it all helps. And then at the odd time we get to buy some meat and have a barbecue. HOE is a bit of a thing as well. So we appreciate you guys giving us some time and giving us your time, but also if you guys are involved with either the Patreon or the super chats, we appreciate that as well. And look, we hope to keep on building. I know I've teased a few times talking to mainstream media. I actually have another meeting tomorrow with mainstream media who like our product. I think both Chewy and I, it would be fair to say, Chewy, that if we could keep going with this through to the election, that would be a pretty fun year. Now, it's not as black and white as, we'll just do it because, Chewy's got a job, I've got other work that I do, but if we can, I know that both of us are already looking forward to watching those debates live with a bingo board, an alcohol bingo board. So, and then the year after that, of course, it's the American election. So what else would we do? It's like, here we are. We're here for a couple of years. What are you about to show us? Anything?
You haven't played the game, so
I haven't played the game. The last one renewed for season 2. People who don't know, all right.
That's one for the gamers.
All right, team. We will see you tomorrow night from 9 o'clock. Now, remember, Friday night from 9, Byron Clark, author of Fear, talking about, shall I just say, the tin foil hat wearing brigade, although the pretty scary and dangerous ones as well. Conspiracy theorist conversation on Friday night. There won't be necessarily any news stories we're doing that night. As we've said, this is a Monday to Thursday. Oh my God, who is this? Drifterfish. Any plans for another series of the Slightly Click Political Show? Holy crap, that's a throwback. You probably don't know this, Chewie, and others probably don't know this as well. I did a podcast, and me and Jeremy Elwood did it, and we only did it in the election cycles. So 2008, 2011. Did we do it in 2014? I can't remember. And it was just a 10-week podcast leading up to the elections called the Slightly Correct Political Show. And it was when I was working at News Talk ZB, so we used all their studios and got a whole bunch of interesting guests in. So wow, Drifterfish, I don't know who you are, but you know about some of the stuff. That's 15 years ago, 2008. Holy crap. That's right. I've been podcasting since 2008, me and Joe Rogan. Just not consistently. Cool. I forgot what I was saying. Reminding you that Byron's on this week. Tell people as well, because the one thing we'll do with Byron that I'm sure people have heard or seen his interviews around the place is we'll be live. And so we'll be taking questions and comments from the audience. I'm sure we'll be banning some people because that'll be the kind of night it is. But that'll be live with Byron on Friday night. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. It's our normal show. And if we have a long form conversation or interview, we slide it into Friday nights. And this week it's Byron Clark with us. Tell your people, tell your friends. And other than that, I think we are done, Chewie.
Nice. Yes, I'll be in the chat for Friday's show. Probably need a little bit more wrangling than usual.
Yeah, and if you do have the ability to get, I think Byron's book drops tomorrow. If you're the kind of person who's interested in those things, try and pick it up. Try and pick it up before Friday night. If you're going to be buying it anyway, try and get it early. Try and get through some of it, and you might have some specific questions about what you're reading and want to know what it's all about. And yeah, we'll have Byron on Friday night, friend of the show, talking to me and talking to Chewie and talking to you, and you can talk to him, and we'll go from there. All right. Lovely to see you all. Funny that we only had a couple of topics tonight, but we still nearly went for an hour and a half. This is our typical hour and a half, hour-long show. Yep. We'll see you next time. Whānau, tomorrow night from 9 p.m. What is it today? Wednesday. So tomorrow is Thursday. So shit, that means I have to, a man with dyslexia has to read Byron's book in 2 days. Holy crapola. All right. We'll get into that. I need to, if there's someone in Dunedin who wants to come and like feed me grapes and read me the book, that'll be choice. We'll get to that though. We'll see you tomorrow night from 9 p.m. for another edition of whatever this is called. I nearly said Friday Night Fever. That was a show I used to do on Classic Hits. Big Hairy News. We'll catch you then. All right, team. Chill. Bye.
Cheers.